Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scot McKay.
Greetings, gentlemen. Welcome again to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scot McKay, at Scot McKay on both Clubhouse and Twitter, Real Scot McKay on Instagram. The website is mountaintoppodcast.com, and as always, you can find the YouTube goodies by searching my name on YouTube, SCOTMCKAY. And listen, guys, if you're not a part of our Facebook group yet, you need to get on Facebook and make that happen, Captain. Do it by searching the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. With me today is a new friend of mine. I have lots of new friends, don't I? I guess it's not just a figure of speech. It's a truth. This guy's a good guy. He and I got along immediately. He's the CEO of Take Flight Learning out of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is a suburb of Philadelphia, a town that I know really, really well. His name is Merrick Rosenberg. Merrick, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Scott. Good to be here.
Now, listen, you've got two books out there. One of them is called The Chameleon, and the other one is called Which Bird Are You? And I know you love these wildlife motifs as you talk about personality and as you talk about leadership and all sorts of cool other things we're going to talk about today, related to our topic du jour, which is maximizing our personality traits. So, talk to me about your birds, man. The birds that give Take Flight its wings.
Sure thing. So, a lot of times we talk about personality and it's incredibly complicated, and I just wanted it to be easy. So I linked 4 styles, 4 birds. It just makes it simple. And you've got eagles. You can imagine eagles, confident, assertive, direct, take charge.
American.
Yeah, it's got a symbol of confidence and leadership. Then you've got the opposite style, which is the dove. And they're more soft-spoken and they're caring and compassionate. They're that person in your family. They want everybody to get along. They're the peacemaker, trying to just smooth it out. That's the dove style. And then we've got the parrot. Parrots are fun. They're talkative. They're outgoing. They're social. They're the eternal optimist. It's all good. Everything always works out. And then the last one is the owl. Logical, analytical. They're taking things apart, asking lots of questions, analyzing. If they're going to do something, they're going to do it right. So 4 birds, 4 styles. We've all got a little bit of each one, but therethere's probably 1 or 2 that are like home base for you.
And all 4 of those are positives.
Absolutely. They all have strengths, but they all have the shadow side too, where sometimes our personality doesn't necessarily work for us, but they are, of course, framed in the positive. They're all good.
All right, man. So with that good description of where you're coming from in terms of kind of mixing up the different personality types and how they contribute to leadership and other good things in our lives, including being attractive to women, which is what we're all about around here. Let's turn our attention to the topic, which is maximizing personality traits. The first question I have to ask you is, how come this just doesn't come natural to us? I mean, shouldn't we all have that kind of level of self-awareness where we know what we're good at and we focus on those things? I mean, where do the blind spots happen there?
Well, we've been talking about knowing ourselves for thousands of years. I mean, we'd love to think that everybody is incredibly self-aware. We know who we are. We know how our personality impacts us and how we're impacting other people. But it's just not always the case. It's an issue of knowing how your style not only impacts your success, but also your relationships.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I understand exactly what you're talking about there. All right, so let's say you're a guy listening to this show and you're thinking to yourself, well, I kind of know what my personality traits are. How can I get to know that better so I can expose maybe some of these areas of competency or ways that I could shine a little bit brighter in my life that maybe I haven't figured out or a part of me yet? How would I go about figuring that out before we can do anything about it?
Well, the first thing is to your point, you've got to be self-aware. I mean, ask yourself, am I more of that more confident, take charge person, which I would call the eagle? Am I more just talkative, more social, more outgoing? Or am I more calm and relaxed? Do I have a system? Do I have a plan? The first thing I would do is say, okay, which one are you? Like, where do you begin? And are you using your strengths to drive your success? Like, if you put yourself in a job that totally doesn't match your style, you're probably not going to be doing too well. So it's like, are you using your style every day to drive your success?
Now, this would seem simple and logical, right? You know, as one of my coworkers used to quip every time someone would say, hey, why are we doing this, this way? It's the wrong way. Why don't we do it this way instead? He would sarcastically reply, because that would be the right thing to do. As if we're all basically suffering from this weird masochistic desire to do everything wrong because, we're afraid of success or something. But indeed, to that point, I think a lot of people, men particularly, and this is a men's show, of course, we like to attempt to prove people wrong when they tell us we can't do something. And a lot of times when we try to do something to prove everybody else wrong, a lot of times we're really just being stubborn instead of productive. You feeling me?
Absolutely. I love this. There's a George Carlin quote I love. He said, everyone driving slower than me is an idiot. Everyone driving faster than me is a maniac.
Exactly.
and basically what he's saying is we think our way is the right way. So whether it's in a personal relationship or at work, it doesn't matter. We think that the way we're doing it is exactly how it should be done. And we don't realize that, maybe other people need things differently than we do. You're talking to your partner, you're in this relationship with someone, and all of a sudden it's like you are imposing your style on them and not realizing, they have very different needs. You can't just talk to them in the way you'd want to be talked to. You got to figure out what they need from you. And that's part of the problem is we think our way is the right way, it's the best way, and then we impose it on others.
Well, we have a pair of similar yet quite distinct dynamics already being discussed here. So first of all, you have this guy who's trying to prove everybody else wrong. And then you have another guy who refuses to see anybody else's point of view and thinks he's doing things the best way, either because he's built a habit around that and it's the way it's always been done, or just because he's arrogant enough not to care about what someone else thinks. So let's talk about both of those guys, because I think it's important. A lot of men have one or the other, or God help us all, both of those traits. So let's take them one at a time. Again, let's revert to the first question. Say you have a guy who someone's told them they're not good enough, so they're going to try hard to prove that person wrong. Obviously, that's counterproductive, right?
Well, if you're trying to prove that you are good enough and it's causing you to work hard and be motivated, that's the positive side. But then there's the dark side too, which is where you get locked in, become arrogant, become stubborn, and you just want to prove them wrong, and then you're not open to possibilities.
Well, how do you know the difference between someone trying to encourage you to do something you don't yet have the confidence to realize you have aptitude for? I may be loading the question here, but so be it. Versus clearly I don't have any talent, any aptitude, or even care to do this, but I'm so stubborn and I'm so charged over someone daring to tell me I can't do it that I'm just going to pull out all stops and try beyond all odds to prove them wrong. I mean, one side's about determination, the other one's about stubbornness, right?
It's true, but what's happening here though is if you knew your personality, if you know what you're good at, you put yourself in a position that you're going to succeed. If you don't know yourself, then you get hired for jobs that aren't good. You get in relationships with people you're not compatible with. If you do not understand your strengths and what drives you, you're going to put yourself in a position that you're constantly battling against yourself, not at somebody else. You're fighting your own self because you're not doing what you're meant to do. But if you're self-aware, you put yourself in a position where you can be successful.
I think it's fascinating how guys will take jobs they're no good at just because they need a job. This is how probably 80% of people in professional sales get into that job, because they think, okay, anybody can do sales. There's nothing to this. Therefore, it's certainly a lot easier. I could be a lot lazier than if I'm, say, digging ditches all day. But they're in the wrong seat on the wrong bus to begin with. There are a lot of jobs like that. Some would argue coaching's like that. Fortunately, I can say such things out loud because I've been at this for 16 years. And of course, most coaches' tenure is measured in dog years. So I can shamelessly say things like that. But on the other hand, I think also guys get into the wrong relationship because a woman shows up, shows some interest, and because he's been so shy around women for so long, or he's got such a relatively small amount of experience with women, he goes, oh, well, okay, here's one who will put up with me. Next thing you know, they get married and they've settled for each other. This isn't who she wanted. she's not who he wanted, and they don't even understand each other or get along, yet they're supposed to spend the rest of their life together. And a lot of that starts with this lack of self-awareness and also that lack of confidence that would come from that to help this guy measure what the right woman for him actually looks and smells like. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right. And here's how you know, whether it's a job or whether it's a relationship, if it's exhausting, if it takes energy from you, that's not how it's supposed to work. If you are in a job that you love, you go home and it feeds you. If you are in a relationship that works, you're not dreading going home because you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to have these conversations that are going to exhaust me. If you're in a relationship that's right, it's easy and it feeds you. And it should be that way. Of course, all relationships take work, but it shouldn't be hard. It should feel comfortable and natural, just like a job should. And that means your personality has a good fit for the person or for the job.
And similarly, you were talking about the kind of guy who would say basically, my way or the highway. Here's how I do things. I don't need your input. Even if you are a world-class, quote-unquote, expert on this, I read a Twitter feed this morning that tells me you're an idiot and you don't know anything and I know everything. You know, all these people who suffer from the dreaded Dunning-Kruger effect, which we talk about quite a bit on this show because unfortunately it needs to be discussed quite a bit. It comes up a lot, especially post-COVID, where everybody is thinking they're an expert on something. What is it about we as men and our stubborn tenacity to things we know very little about or think we've done right all this time, but maybe if we were a little bit more teachable, a little bit more coachable, we'd find a better way and make our lives so much easier? My guess is that it tends to be tied to our ego a little, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And you know, I talked about the bird. Certain styles have more ego than others. If you've got that, what you would think of as that traditional eagle style of take charge, I know I'm right, I'm confident, that can lead to a lot of conflict because you may not be as open to the ideas of others. Whereas, you know, picture someone who's a dove, they're more soft-spoken, they are more open, they don't have that same level of ego, which they're not as stubborn as the eagle. So your style plays a big role, right? If you are that eagle style, you got to be careful because you could be closed to ideas or different ways of doing things, or you could become stubborn and stuck in your ways. So our personality really plays out in how we interact with people and the role that we have. And if we aren't aware, we get locked in and then we aren't open to the needs of others.
You know, there's a story from ages past. I don't even really honestly know if it's apocryphal or not. But as the story goes, Benjamin Franklin wanted to make the national bird of the nascent United States of America a turkey.
Yes.
And he was talked out of it by Jefferson or someone to make it an eagle instead. And I can only imagine basically how the personality of the country may not have evolved as such if we were a bunch of turkeys as opposed to eagles. Turkeys, of course, being conspicuously absent from your Mount Rushmore of birds, right?
Exactly.
I imagine there's a fifth one out there who probably would more resemble a turkey, but by God, we don't want to aspire to that. So meanwhile,
the vulture's another one.
Vultures are another one, sure. So to my point, I think a lot of us as men really value that eagle persona. And I think the foundation of that is we as men really value being quote unquote alpha. We really want to be that guy who's in charge. And so clearly I think most of us would characterize the eagle as alpha. Certainly in your vernacular, the owl may have some alpha traits also. But those of us who see ourselves as eagles, we're thinking of being alpha as this universal positive, where I'm calling the shots, people are following me. But there's a dark side to that too, isn't there? Talk about that with these guys. I mean, is being alpha necessarily always such a good thing?
Well, first of all, think about eagles and doves tend to get married most often. So you have this kind of alpha male, take charge, assertive person, and they're with the more soft-spoken dove. Now, at a healthy level, doves actually appreciate it when that eagle takes charge, makes decisions, makes things happen. But here's when those folks get in trouble. When you dial up the eagle energy and when you overuse a strength, your strength becomes your weakness. So if you take assertiveness, dial it up, it becomes aggressive. You take directness, dial it up, it becomes blunt and insensitive. Now you're offending your partner. So the thing is, eagles can be confident, but you can't be arrogant. You can be direct, but you have to be also respectful. And so the challenge is to use that eagle style, but don't overuse it, because if you overuse it, now you offend the dove, and a heck of a lot of eagles are married to doves.
Well, the female dove can recharge the eagle's batteries with comfort and softness and pleasure. That's all well and good. What I'm thinking about as a result of what you just shared is ye old, time-worn idea of being Mr. Nice Guy. So if I'm an alpha, how can I be more compassionate, and how can I tone things down when I have to without letting the pendulum swing all the way to the other side and becoming Mr. Nice Guy? I think maybe a question to ask in tandem to this to help you out a little bit, just in the interest of a more full and complete answer, would be, as an eagle, do I always have to be a hard ass? Or is Mr. Nice Guy not really so much about being nice as it is being weak? And so therefore there's got to be this balance somewhere where I can be strong, yet compassionate and kind to the people who I'm being an eagle with.
Yes. And what you're saying is there's this place in the center where the eagle is confident, they're strong, they're assertive, they're direct, they call it like it is. But if you dial that down too much, then they will feel like I'm weak and I'm just being pleasing to others, but I'm really not really standing in my power. And I'm not saying that eagles should do that. That's not where eagles should be. Eagles should be direct. Be yourself. Don't try to change yourself. Where they really get themselves in trouble is where they dial it up too much. Now they've become aggressive and pushy and domineering. If the eagle finds that sweet spot where they treat their partner with respect and compassion, it's not that they're being weak. It's that they're honoring their partner. Be respectful, but just don't dial it up too much either.
Well, you mentioned the word compassion like I did. And I think sometimes people misrepresent that emotion. It's been termed the rarest of all human emotions. And really, it's a combination of having empathy towards someone and having a desire to do something about it, right? If it's a bad situation, how can I take leadership to improve it? And I think therein lies the rub when we're discussing something like, what's the difference between compassion and empathy? Aren't they synonyms? And they're really not, because empathy is a feature of compassion, like I just described. I would contend that the more of an eagle one is, male or female, okay, let's just cut to the chase here. It doesn't have to be gender specific. But the more of a take charge kind of person one is, the better they're going to be at being compassionate, because they will have more personal power to affect the good or the change in the world that's positive that they want to affect, right?
Yeah, in fact, look, take politicians. There's a lot of eagle politicians. And we might think, wait a minute, I'm not sure if I'm seeing compassion. Well, the reason they're doing what they're doing is because they care. They care about the country. They care about people. It's just that their compassion may come across in the way of, I'm doing things for you. It may not come across as they put their arm around you and you're feeling sad. They say, I'm so sorry to hear that. They're validating your emotion. It may come across as, how can I help you? What do you need me to do? How can I fix it? So that compassion may come across as, I'm going to do something for you, as opposed to I'm going to validate emotions, which is what a dove would do. And so eagles can be very compassionate, but it comes across differently than if a dove were expressing compassion.
Well, in all fairness, while we're talking about politicians here briefly, some narcissistic manipulators can come around and very much be wolves in sheep's clothing. They're all about themselves and their personal gain, but they are very successful at duping the masses into believing that they'll care about them and fulfill their promises and whatever. That's the catch-22 of voting people into office. Sometimes you really can't know them from afar as well as you'd like to until you see what the results are after they're already in office.
It's the eagle dialed up way too much. You take eagle and their confidence. Dial up confidence, you get arrogance. Dial up arrogance, you get narcissism. So what happens is when we're out of balance, our style no longer serves us. Our personality actually gets in the way. But if that politician or somebody in a relationship is confident within themselves, they don't need to be arrogant. They don't need to have all that ego, because they don't need all that like validation from other people. Just they could be themselves and they're fine. And they're now not pushing the buttons of the people around them.
Well, that brings up an interesting point that I think is very central to the topic du jour. You've heard adages before like absolute power corrupts absolutely. Freshmen congressmen and women are often ready to take on the world, and they have this youthful, almost naive exuberance about how they're going to change everything and make everything better, and I'm going to serve my constituents. And then you check in with them 24, 28 years later, and they have $10 million bank accounts, and they're corrupted by political action committees and the funding that comes into it, and they got book deals. And it seems like somewhere along the line, they lost that optimism and that genuine concern for their constituents. You know, let's hear it for term limits, but even still, relating that back to relationships. Let's say I am an alpha kind of person and I mean well, and a woman shows up who's very much a dove, and I get into a relationship with her and she just keeps giving and giving and giving without asking. Well, I may turn into a real jerk while having full permission from her to do so. In other words, I may start taking her for granted, not spending any money on her anymore, not taking her out on dates, not showing her a whole lot of affection, because she's allowing me to get lazy with that. She's just completely passive. And the result is I've turned into someone I didn't want to be or didn't even mean to be, but laziness got the best of me.
Yep.
Her demeanor got the best of me. And now everybody else may be looking as a third person into our relationship going, God, what a jerk he is. And, you know, I've seen this happen in breathtaking fashion before. I once knew a guy who was very, very generous, and his mom had just passed away and left him a considerable amount of money. And most of his friends weren't exactly wealthy. And he started lending his credit card out to friends, saying, hey, get yourself a new shirt for your interview or this and that. And the next thing you know, he was broke because all his friends had spent all his money and everybody was still acting friendly towards him. But as soon as he didn't have any money anymore, he found out how few friends he really had because everybody was given permission to treat him like a doormat. So, hey, you know what? I can either have this stuff in my life, these financial benefits in my life, or not. And people basically were trained by him to run roughshod all over him. That's an interesting dynamic, isn't it? And it certainly ties into the topic of knowing yourself, knowing your personality traits, and making sure they're really acting both in your best interest and the interest of everybody else. Because when you get down to it, I'm not sure who really benefited from that arrangement I just described to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, what happens is we're with a partner who is more reserved, they're more passive. They don't state their needs. You say, hey, what do you want to do for dinner tonight? You want Italian? Sure, sounds good. They don't really have an opinion. Well, what do you want? I don't care, whatever you want. How about some Chinese food? Sure, it sounds good. But they never voice their opinion. So you know what happens? The reality is, especially if you've got like that more quieter, reserved personality, which that eagle does tend to get married to the dove, what ends up playing out is you stop asking and you start making decisions. And then you're perceived as somebody who no longer cares, and you're no longer sensitive, and you're no longer compassionate towards their needs because you stopped asking.
You stopped communicating.
Yeah, because they never answered anyway. But what you have to realize is they actually do have an opinion, that they really do have a perspective. We just need to take our time and allow them to have their voice. And a lot of times what happens is if we are in a relationship where one person's more dominant, one person's more passive, that passive person could get steamrolled over. And after a while, they've had it. And the relationship stops working because you have one person who's like making all the decisions and another person who's just along for the ride. And that after a little while, that gets frustrating to both parties.
It just got bottled up.
Yeah. And the key, it's not what you're hitting on here. It's not just knowing who you are, but it's also knowing who they are. And that sometimes we have to acknowledge that just because they don't state their needs, it doesn't mean they don't have them. And if you are the kind of person who likes to make decisions, you may stop asking for other people's opinion if they aren't vocalizing their needs. But we can't do that. We have to make sure that the people around us get their needs met too.
You know, key to this discussion we're having right now are two very, very tricky elements. And I'd like for you to discuss both of them, okay? The first one is, man, how hard is it to know how you come off to other people? And second of all, how equally difficult, if not more so, is it to understand how your thoughts, your actions, your demeanor affects other people. Like, why are people responding to me the way they are? Why are people doing things in a certain way when I'm around? Could it possibly be that these people are all different when I either walk into the room or leave the room? Man, that involves a Herculean amount of self-awareness. And I think it's hard enough to know how others view us, let alone understand the impact who we are has on other people. How do we sort all that? How can we gain some self-awareness, practically speaking, there?
The first question is, how do I come off? How do I get perceived by others? And the key is to make sure that you're using the strengths of your personality, that you're not underusing it and you're not overusing it. You know, you take someone who's the parrot. Parrots are talkative, they're social, they're fun, they bring energy. But if they dial that up too much, they dominate the conversation. No one else has any airtime. They're so scattered because they're like multitasking. They're all over the place. Their personality is not helping them. How do I come off to others? If you're using your strengths of your personality, if you're maximizing who you are, your personality is helping you, and it's helping you all the time. But if you dial it up too far, you're going to come across to others as somebody who's just insensitive or scattered or passive. And that's the problem, is that if you want to know how you come across to others, pay attention to what you're doing and make sure your personality is helping you. Make sure you're not overusing it. It's that dial. You got to find that sweet spot in the middle. It's like an engine. You push it into the red zone, it's not a good thing. And it's also, if it's too low, it's not a good thing either. There's that sweet spot where it's so smooth. And when you're using your strength, it serves you. That's when you're in that space, you're coming across to others in a positive way. You are absolutely maximizing your personality. But can you see how if you overuse it, you now are in this place, in that red zone, not just for you personally, but in the relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see that with crystal clarity. And it brings up this point. A lot of us, men and women, we tend to see patterns in terms of how people treat us, in terms of how our social life goes, in terms of how people respond to us. And so many times, Merrick, it seems like we'll end up blaming everybody else when we really should be looking in the mirror.
Sure. Well, that's much easier. Pointing fingers at other people when relationships aren't going well or your job's not going well, it's easy to blame other people. And what I've found is we are very out of touch with how other people perceive us. And that, going to that question you asked a moment ago, we think that, well, I'm doing a great job. You know, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And yet we don't necessarily know how others do perceive us. I mean, look, this is just basic relationship 101. Couples that have great communication and talk about how they communicate tend to have good relationships. And that's where whether you're in the workplace and talking about your manager and your staff, or you're talking about your spouse, when you have conversations about how you're communicating, guess what happens? You improve communication. It's not rocket science. But so many people don't have any conversations like that. And therefore, they don't even realize that they're offending their partner.
Well, a couple quick takeaways here. First of all, if you're always looking out for yourself instead of being generous and giving to others, people are going to stop wanting to feed that. Okay. If you're trying to gain approval from people, they're going to withhold it from you. Whereas if you offer approval to other people and encouragement to other people, it's amazing how the law of reciprocity kicks in, that time-honored psychological principle, and people will give back to you. Now, if we see a whole lot of psychotic people and selfish people and people who don't have their own personalities figured out and don't have a whole lot of social skill, like we've talked about recently on this show, well, then, maybe they aren't going to do that for you. Maybe they won't be reciprocal. Maybe they'll just keep trying to use you. Sure, but that's their problem, not yours or mine at this point, right, when we're relating to them. But when people are optimistic, when we think highly of things and we expect good outcomes, that tends to rub off on other people, and they think good things about us. They are optimistic towards us. When we complain about everything, when everything's a bummer, when someone has what I call the schleprock complex, where there's like this dark cloud hanging over them and they're just kind of heavy, or as they say in Mexican Spanish, pesado, they're just, a bummer to hang out with, people start avoiding them. And if we lack the self-awareness to see what's going on there, we'll think, oh, all these people are just not social, or they're all just jerks, or people are just, they treat me badly because they're just inherently awful people. But if we're willing to show a little bit of humility and perhaps try doing things a little differently than we always have, and, maybe, Merrick, even grit and bear it a little bit in terms of trying this new thing, being a little more optimistic, checking ourselves when we're really just taking from other people, and stick our toe in that cold swimming pool of being generous for a change. Usually in my coaching experience, when guys will try this and give it a shot, even if they're incredibly cynical, in general or in part, associated with this particular trial they're putting to the test socially, it's amazing how soon they see results. And it's almost like a veil gets lifted and they go, oh, I see. So if I stop trying to get into this woman's pants and get sex from her and start actually enjoying female human beings, they start flirting with me more and telling me how they're horny. That was amazing. How did that work? Or if I stop bragging to everybody about how amazing I am, they'll start noticing on their own I'm pretty amazing and start telling me I'm amazing. And the next thing you know, I've heard it now and I don't need to be told it anymore. And we can just both, be friends now. A little bit of humility goes a long way. But you know what, Merrick? What I've always said is the worst human fault a person can have is stubborn inability to be teachable, because then you're stuck with all the rest of your faults because you're not going to be moving away from them anytime soon.
Right. And what I'm hearing too is that, and I share this a lot with my clients, is that it's a matter of tapping into all four of these styles. I always talk about what I call being the chameleon. Look, if you were in eagle mode all the time, you could be perceived as arrogant, but doves are very humble. You know what? Tap into some of that dove humility and be humble. Parrots bring a sense of optimism and joy and energy. Tap into that. Parrots have an energy that is so positive, and people like to be around positive people. The owl brings a sense of organization to a relationship. We all know things have to get done. Bills have to get paid. There's places we need to be. If you have kids, there's a schedule. Owls bring a sense of structure. And you know what? It's the one of those four that's super low for you that probably gets you in trouble in your relationships. If you lack the ability to be empathetic and the ability to be more dove-like, that's going to probably get you in trouble with your spouse at some time. If you're disorganized and can't get things done, it's going to probably get you in trouble at times. If you're always down or negative, it's going to get you in trouble. If you're too much eagle, too direct, it's going to get you in trouble. So it's being the chameleon. It's like learning to tap into all four of those styles is what helps us to build healthy relationships.
Being socially flexible like that is a wonderful skill. Unfortunately, though, I think sometimes we get so tied to our own style of relating to other people that we start looking down with disdain on styles that other people might present. Like if you're a really alpha guy, you may start thinking, well, being a dove is for wussies. And what you risk at this point is failing in another area that we've been talking about a lot recently on this show, which is reading the room. And you've got to be able to walk into a situation and go, all right, who are these people? What are they about? What's the vibe here? What's important to them? And instead of trying to be a bull in the china shop and say, I'm going to eagle my way through this room full of parrots, hey, you know what? Exercise some of the flexibility that comes not only with maturity, but a little bit of life wisdom, and realize that, hey, I don't have to be fake. I can still be authentic, but I'm going to let this corner of my personality type rise to the top right now and maybe park that other part of my personality for a while and save it for a time when it's more appropriate. In my own life, the quick example here is, I coach a lot of guys one-on-one. Some guys want me to be more stern and more direct, and some guys really need a finer hand. They need for me to be a lot more genteel with them. And, the women I coach also, a lot of times they'll tell me the way they need me to be, or we'll kind of settle into this pattern so that they get the results they want. But all of that is part of my personality. All of that is authentic on my part. But, there's a time and place for those personality gifts we bring to the world. And it isn't one size fits all by any stretch, is it?
That's right. It's that old expression, if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail. It's like, you think my way, I'm just going to be like this. I'm like this all the time in every situation with every person I interact with. Yeah. How's that working for you? When you lack flexibility, you lack the ability to get along with some of the people around you. And the most flexible people tend to be the happiest people because they just get along with people. And guess what? They have healthy relationships. They have successful careers because they know how to navigate relationships because they're flexible and not locked into, this is the way it's always done. This is how I do it. Deal with it. Dislike it if you want, but this is me. That doesn't work. The most successful people are the most flexible people.
Yeah, how about that? I mean, there's a lot of truth there. There are a lot of one-trick ponies out there, and I strongly suspect that's due to people being in their comfort familiarity zone. This is what I know. This is what I do. This is what I'm good at. I don't want to take the risk to come off as more like you or give some other way of being a try. And what happens is we're just simply not as successful with other people. And, you know, the hammer and the nail analogy is just so true. The more we can relate to other people, the more we can kind of open up our hearts and minds and figure out, hey, you know what? What are some of these ways that I can relate to other people that are really genuine? They are in there. They've been trying to get out for a long time, and just be vulnerable enough and take ourselves less seriously enough, which is another theme around here, to give it a try and see how it goes. And if you find it isn't you, so be it. But I think the moral of this story is, hey, maximizing your personality traits in many ways means getting out of that stubborn hole we've dug ourselves into and seeing what else might fit our style a little bit. It's like if I've worn the same jeans and the same t-shirts forever, and I go into a store and try on some new clothes, I may look at myself in the mirror and go, my God, you look like a dork. Or, you know, this just doesn't seem to be you. But then I look at myself again and go, you know, I like it. And next thing you know, you've got a new favorite outfit to wear. You know, I just bought a pair of shoes that are Vans that look a lot like Hugh Hefner's smoking jacket with the red velvet. But somehow I thought those shoes were quirky enough to be different. And somehow they fit my personality because I've been a dating coach in the pickup artist world since way back. And I'm also a BMX guy from way back, so I wear Vans. So somehow those shoes are just perfect. But I'll tell you, they weren't the first shoes I thought to buy from a style perspective. But yet they somehow worked. So instead of wearing the same shoes I always wear, you know, I have those to kind of mix in once in a while. But I still have to tell you, I favor my Origin boots, number one. I wear those things almost everywhere. But that's a nod to the sponsors.
But there's a place for those shoes.
Yeah.
You're not going to necessarily wear them to a wedding, but you might say on a Saturday night, hey, these are perfect. The analogy I love too is like you're playing a round of golf. Well, you need more than one club. I mean, you're not putting from, 10 feet out with the driver. I mean, you're not going to hit it 100 yards with a putter. I mean, the thing is, you've got an assortment pack there for a reason. And if you only go with one club every single time, that is not going to be a very good round of golf. You've got to be able to tap into the right skills at the right time. And that means you've got to be flexible. You've got to be adaptable. You've got to flex to the person you're talking to. The more you do that, the easier it is because they get their needs met. And guess what happens? They get their needs met. You know who else gets their needs met? You do. So when you're flexible, everybody's happy.
But alas, so many people trying to tee off with a putter. Huh? His name is Merrick Rosenberg. He's the CEO of Take Flight Learning. His books, which you can find on Amazon, are The Chameleon and Which Bird Are You? And conveniently enough for you guys, I've added both of them to the top of my Amazon influencer queue, which you can find by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/Amazon. And you can indeed find out about Merrick Rosenberg's work, the kind of trainings he has, the kind of products and services he offers by going to a special URL that I've set up for you, which is mountaintoppodcast.com/flight. And there you will be able to find out all the things that are involved with Take Flight Learning and Merrick Rosenberg. Very much worth checking out, by the way. Merrick Rosenberg, thank you so much for a very healthy and happy discussion that I think a lot of these guys really needed to hear, myself included. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, indeed. I hope you'll come back. And guys, I would love for you to come back to mountaintoppodcast.com if you haven't visited for a while. I've already mentioned Origin in Maine, and indeed the best boots you will ever wear. You can check them out by going to mountaintoppodcast.com/origin. Also, Hero Soap will clean you up, make you smell good, make you feel like a man. And if you have not yet tried their body wash when you are taking a shower with a woman, you are missing out on one of life's special treasures. So go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Hero Soap and get you some. With Origin and Hero Soap, you can use the coupon code Mountain10 and get an additional 10% off. If you haven't been to mountaintoppodcast.com lately, hey guys, you know what? We're already well into 2022. It's time to get the right woman in your life once and for all. Go to mountaintoppodcast.com, click on the red button in the upper right-hand corner, get on my calendar and talk to me for free for 25 minutes. As I've also mentioned to you recently, I'm doing master classes once a month on the topics that you guys are telling me you're interested in fine-tuning in your life the most. When you sign up for my newsletter, which you can do from mountaintoppodcast.com, you'll be apprised of when those master classes are happening. And I hope to see you not only on my email list, but also in those master classes. All that and more is there for you at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.